Our scripture today comes from John chapter 11, verses 17 to 27. And it says, "On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. 'Lord,' Martha said to Jesus, 'if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask.' Jesus said to her, 'Your brother will rise again.' Martha answered, 'I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day.' Jesus said to her, 'I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?' 'Yes, Lord,' she replied. 'I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is coming into the world.' This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be unto God." There was a man, as you see pictured here, named Edward Everett Hale, who was the chaplain of the Senate in the early 1900s. When asked what it was he prayed for the senators as chaplain, he said, "Oh, I don't pray for the senators." He said, "I look at all those politicians and I pray for the country." I guess it's truly things remain the same as much as they may have changed all these years. No matter which side of the aisle we find ourselves on, we can certainly say we certainly are all in need of grace when it seems like folks sometimes we need answers but can't seem to have our politicians get to them. There was a politician who did a fairly good job. His name was Fiorello LaGuardia. And this is his picture here. Fiorello LaGuardia was the mayor of New York City during the height of the Great Depression. And he wasn't somebody just to sit behind his desk, you see pictured here, but he went out and went with the fire department to put out fires to see what they had to go through, and went out with policemen on the beat to see what it was like to be a policeman. He also had a heart for people. He would read the comics over the radio on Sundays so that kids whose parents couldn't afford a paper could hear the funnies read to them. He would, on his own dime, take whole orphanages to professional baseball games to give them an outing. He was somebody who had a heart for people. One night he went to a court where he took over for the judge, as the law stated he was able to do at that day and time. And sitting as the judge, his first case in that cold January 1935, was a lady who had stolen 2 loaves of bread from a store. He asked her what her story was. Turns out that she was a grandmother who was trying to take care of her grandkids, had no money, no food, the kids were starving, she didn't know what to do, and so though she had never done anything like it before, she took 2 loaves of bread from the store. The governor, or the mayor, then asked the store owner, "Well, what is your story?" And the man said, "Well, I'm sorry that this lady has to deal with this, but you have to realize I had to buy those loaves of bread, and if I don't sell them, if I allow people just to take them without paying, then I won't have anything to feed my family with. There's a price to pay here, and if it's not paid, then people will come take everything I own." And the mayor said, "Well, I understand that." And so he said, "The law has been broken, and so there has to be a penalty paid." And he said, "The fine for this sort of matter is $10, which in that day and time was a lot of money. And this lady in no way, shape, or form had that. And so thinking she was going to go to jail, she started to cry. But then the mayor pulled a $10 bill out of his pocket. And he said, "But your fine is paid." And then he went on to say, addressing the entire courtroom, "And all of you are fined 50 cents for living in a city that allows a grandmother and her grandchildren to starve to death to the point she has to steal 2 loaves of bread." And the whole courtroom cheered and willingly gave over 50 cents, even though that was hard to come by. And he gave it to the lady. It came out to about $45. Now that is a story of grace. You see, the woman had broken the law. The law's the law. And didn't matter what her reason was. Notice that LaGuardia didn't wink at the fact or act as if the law was no account. He was charged as mayor with enforcing the law. And so he gave the correct sentence. But he didn't leave it there. In grace, he paid the fine the woman couldn't pay, and then added even more to it. Again, not denigrating the law, he chastised those in the room who had left the woman in the situation she was in and ended up giving her more than she could ever have expected. Well, in today's passage, we see a similar definition of grace played out in the life of Jesus and Lazarus. In today's passage, we can see that Lazarus, Jesus' friend, has died. Jesus was some distance away when he received word to come that Lazarus was sick. However, he didn't come straight away, but he tarried. But he tarried for a purpose. When he finally did leave to go see Lazarus, Jesus tells his disciples that Lazarus is sleeping. He means, of course, that Lazarus is dead. But his disciples misunderstand, thinking that he means that Lazarus is only sleeping. But Jesus means that he is dead, and he explains that directly to the disciples. Like the disciples, we often misunderstand what God says or what God's purposes may be. Yes, Jesus could have gone and healed Lazarus, but all are about to see an even greater miracle. When he arrives, both Lazarus' sisters in turn, both Martha and Mary, come to greet the Master, and both are at a loss as to what to think. Jesus had healed so many. They'd seen it with their own eyes, but why didn't he come heal his friend Lazarus, their brother? No doubt his death hurt greatly, but also no doubt the Lord's coming too late hurt them as well. The Lord, however, is never too late, but right on time for his purpose. And his purposes are always good for us and for our blessing if we'll let them be so. Now again here we see, at least initially on Martha's part, a misunderstanding. Jesus says to her, "Your brother will rise again." This is a statement of fact. Jesus means it, that it's going to happen in the next few moments. But Martha takes it as a standard funeral greeting from those days. You know, today at a funeral we may say, "I'm so sorry for your loss," or "They were such a good person, I know they're with the Lord now." And what they would say in that day, meaning kind of the same thing, was, "Well, your loved one will rise again," meaning your loved one on the great day of resurrection will rise again because they were a good and righteous person. And Martha responds with the expected response to that greeting. "Yes, I know that he will stand again on the last day, the day of resurrection and judgment." But then Jesus explains to her a deep truth. "I am the resurrection and life." Jesus is saying that resurrection and life eternal are not just a day, an event. Yes, they will happen, but that's not all they are. In fact, they will only happen because Jesus himself is the resurrection and the life. Jesus is the resurrection walking. Jesus himself is life walking. And so to have life means to cling to him. So in Jesus, as he says himself, we'll never really die. Yes, we, unless the Lord comes while we're still here, will die in body, but we will live in spirit until that great day in his presence. And so we will never truly die. And Martha gets it. When asked if she believes, she goes, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Messiah, the promised one, and also that you're the Son of God," which shows that she knows that the Lord is there with her and that all things are possible. So Jesus goes to the tomb where Lazarus has lain for 4 days, long enough so that the body has begun to smell and decompose. Lazarus is truly dead. Dead, dead. Not sleeping, not play acting, not taking part in some elaborate trick or ritual. He is dead. Since he is dead, he can hear nothing. He can see nothing. He can smell nothing. He can taste nothing. He can feel nothing. He has no plans. He cannot move. He has not the will to move, for he cannot think. His body is going back to the clay from which it was fashioned in the first place, and it is just as responsive as a lump of clay would be. This is a picture of us, all of us, not just when we physically die in our bodies, but that's a picture of us outside of God's grace. Outside of God's grace, we are spiritually dead. We might physically be breathing and walking and talking and eating and speaking and making plans. We may be at the height of our life. But if we are outside of God's grace, then we are spiritually dead. And spiritually, when we're dead, we're like Lazarus is physically. Spiritually, we see nothing. Spiritually, we hear nothing. We are blind and deaf. Spiritually, we taste nothing. We're not cognizant of God's blessings. We might physically move about, but spiritually, we are going nowhere. Without God's grace, we are no better off than Lazarus, dead. But then something amazing happens. The Lord has the tomb open, and he speaks into the tomb saying, Lazarus, come out. Martha and Mary could have done that, but Lazarus would not have heard, and he would have stayed where he was. All Lazarus' friends could have shouted that, but it would have made no difference. All the priests and Levites and the religious people could have called that, but they would have gotten no response. But this isn't one of them calling. This is the Lord, life himself, calling. Remember that God spoke into the void, into nothingness, and created everything that there is. And so Jesus, God the Son, speaks into the void of death, into the void of grave, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus hears and responds. Because Jesus spoke, Lazarus heard when he could not have heard anyone or anything else. When Jesus spoke, Lazarus listened, and his once dead and decaying body was instantly made whole and viable and alive once again, and he moved with will and purpose. Clay came to life and came forward, able to see and hear and feel once again. And this is the same grace with which Jesus speaks into our lives. He will one day speak it into our lives when we die, so that we might live forever with him, but he will also speak it to us now, spiritually speaking. He will speak life to us. He will speak to us now and speak blessings to us we could not have imagined. Pardon me. And this is the grace of it. He speaks it, though we could do nothing to earn it. We cannot be righteous enough or good enough or do enough good things. We cannot plan it. We cannot provoke it or cause it. We cannot work enough to get it on our own, because it is the Lord himself who is life and grace. And he speaks it to us, otherwise we are dead. So when we find ourselves at rock bottom, when we find ourselves worn to the core, when death seems to surround us, and darkness seems to cover light, and there seems to be no hope, and there seems to be no way that we can work our way out of it, then look to the Lord, for it is he that can speak that grace unto us, and that blessing of life unto us, that no one else can. When the Lord speaks, nothing can resist his words. Chains are broken, wounds are bound up, prison doors flung open, life comes into the midst of death. Old things are made whole, and new things are created. The words which had power to create the universe and everything in it, and which is able to bring forth life out of nothingness, now speaks life into our lives. What power can resist those living words? None. No power is able to resist the one who is himself, life itself. Let go and let God, the old saying goes, and still holds true for today. Let the Lord speak life and light and joy and peace and healing and creation and newness and blessing into our lives in every way. Like that woman that LaGuardia dealt with in court, we will find that the Lord has paid our price for us, and that our price that he paid was for our freedom and redemption in life. And furthermore, he has spoken blessings above and beyond that, more than we could ever imagine, to us. So hear the words and the promises that the Lord speaks to us today, and live.